Kufar Akbar, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Cross and the Crescent discussion group. This is a live streamed show dedicated to rightly dividing the truth between Christianity and Islam. We are here every Sunday afternoon, except for last Sunday, but every Sunday afternoon at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're normally here for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the topic and how much we want to talk to each other and can tolerate one another. Happy Father's Day to all those fathers out there. I'm sure you all are a blessing to your family and enjoy them as much as you possibly can when you can. I had all of them are over up until about an hour and a half ago. So after they left, I laid down and took me a good power nap that lasted a little longer than I intended it to. And when I logged in, Darcy was mocking me for yawning. What are you yawning so much? I'm like, look, I got wore out and I just woke up. But it's all good. Thank you for being back here today after taking off last Sunday. We had to take a little trip to Branson, Missouri. In Branson, Missouri, folks. Now, Branson, Missouri is supposed to be this... Well, I don't even know what it's supposed to be. Does you guys know what it's supposed to be? It's supposed to be like it's tourist attraction. People go out in the middle of the Ozarks, and just out in the middle of nowhere, you have Branson. But anyway, my granddaughter had a softball tournament up there, so I was up there last weekend. And you want to hear something sad? Listen to this. This is sad. In Missouri, marijuana is legal. So in Branson, which is supposed to have, it's like a Christian attraction. They have all these Christian-oriented shows there. Oh, also, they have not just one, but they have 2 Trump stores. They sell nothing but Donald Trump campaign paraphernalia.
Isn't it also like a dry county? You can't buy beer there. I think it's a dry county. It's a dry county, isn't it? Branson, Missouri, it's a dry county. You can't buy alcohol.
Well, I don't know. I didn't buy any when I was there. I didn't buy any there either.
Weed.
I mean, it's legal, and they were selling it. Well, they might not be able to sell beer, but they were definitely selling ganja. In well, not that I went, but okay. Let me just. They had stores there, okay, that said dispensaries for.
We got them all over here now.
Yeah, I know. It's really sad that this is what happens to all great societies. You become so. Your life, your quality of life becomes so good that the only thing that you can do to enjoy life is to alter to get drunk or to, do drugs or whatever. I mean, that just tells you where we are as a society. And, if there's anything that this country needs right now, it's a good dose of Christ and the Spirit's pouring out. Anyway, I was just disappointed to see that. Okay, so this week, I was on, myself and Connie. Connie's not here. We were on Lloyd DeJong's channel once again, which, I tell you what, being able to go on his channel is really a lot of fun. And this week I discussed a topic based on this book right here. If y'all can see this, Jesus and the Manuscript by Craig Evans. If you are ever going to get a book that really debunks, and I'm going to show you why, debunks the Bart Erhman's argument of the world, it's this book right here. And I'm going to show you why here in just a couple minutes. This guy, well, there was a movie made. Let me write this. I wrote this down. There was a movie made called Fragments of Truth a number of years ago. I'm not sure how old it is, but he was either part of it or headed it or something. So if you ever get time to watch that on YouTube, Fragments of Truth, this is basically the how the argument goes. And I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. No, I wanted to play a video first. Let me play this video first here. Present. I'm going to show this video for all of you that, what is this called? Right here. For all of you that might have some time next month, we're going to have an apologetics powwow in Ohio. And Paul's going to be part of this, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I will be there.
Okay. Let's go ahead and hear what the Dizzle has to say.
Before Christ, I was
Can you hear this? Did you hear him? Can you hear him?
a violent psychopath.
Without Christ, I was dead, walking dead, dead who is trying to breathe, dead who was nobody is trying to become somebody.
Before Christ, I was a criminal.
Without Christ, I was empty, without purpose.
Without Christ, I was living for myself.
Without Christ, I was selfish and lost in a cycle of sexual addiction.
Without Christ, I quickly became a control freak whose life was spinning further and further out of control the more I desperately tried to control it. I was deceived, confused, distressed, depressed, anxious, dying, suicidal, and lost. I was drunk and drugged up to run away from reality. I was drowning in hopelessness. I felt empty and brokenhearted.
Without Christ, I was enslaved to my selfish desires.
Without Christ, I could not even desire to do the right thing when the wrong thing was so attractive. But temptation is no match for Christ, and there's a world of people who will be slaves to sin forever unless they become conquerors in Christ too.
This world is filled with people who are lost like I was. But when I come to know Christ, I became a born-again Christian.
With Christ, when Christ become mine, knowing him is only life, I have been freely lived. I've been freely saved. Knowing Christ is the only life, I have been freely made alive.
With Christ, I'm a peaceful psychopath.
With Christ, we know God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. I know the truth, and I am loved. I don't have to endure my pain alone. I don't have to be afraid of the future. I know God is good, and I know his ways are best. I'm not trapped by the darkness anymore. I rejoice in the light. I'm adopted by the Father, guided by the Spirit, and redeemed by the Son for his glory. And I get to shine his light and share his love with those around me too.
With Christ, I am fully me, with a goal and purpose.
With Christ, I'm living for God and his mission, which is better by far.
After Christ, I am a prison minister.
With Christ, I am free from sexual addiction, and he's making me selfless.
With Christ, I'm set free. And there's a whole world of people that can be free. Free indeed.
And God wants us to share the gospel with them.
Learn how to share Christ with the world so they too can be set free.
Free from sin, from cults, from lies, from darkness, and free to live in the truth and love and light.
Join us for this year's free Seek and Share Truth Conference in Ohio. We hope to see you there.
Do yourselves a favor, take a picture of that little ID piece there, that little, yeah.
Let me,
And
can you get it if you want to take a picture? Take a picture of the, what do we call them?
Q code or whatever.
There we go. QR code. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah. And the conference is free. You just got to get yourselves there. This is exciting. All these people are volunteering their time for you. So I know I'm going to be there. Osama's going to be there. Al is the last speaker. She's the one pretty much putting it all together. Her husband was the other young man that's in there. So yes, and it'll be exciting. In that picture on the bottom right, I'm in the back. I'm the one in the back on the left. So yeah, it was exciting.
Was that
David?
That was from last year.
David is actually a tall guy. I didn't expect that. I think he's like 6'4", 6'5". He's pretty tall.
All right. There we go. Okay. So if you're interested in that, you could go ahead and just go on YouTube and then bring this video up. There, it's in Lodi, Ohio is the name of the town. Am I correct on this? Lodi.
I don't remember. I got a ride, so I didn't pay attention.
Yeah, it's 7 hours and some change from where I am. So I plan on driving up there myself. If anything, just to meet you, Paul. I've never met Paul.
Oh, that'd be cool. This is just, yeah. I met somebody last year there, Larry. That was kind of exciting. Yeah.
So, okay, let's go ahead and jump into today's show. As I mentioned, I am going through this book, Jesus and the Manuscripts. There's a lot of exciting information in here, and I have put, I don't know how many different times we have talked about how we can trust the gospel message. I mean, how many times have we done this here, folks? I mean, it's just every time we turn around, I'm doing a show, or at least mentioning something about how early the Gospels were written. And what I've done is I've gone in and I put that in a slideshow format with a timeline. Now I finally sat down, took some time because I'm tired now and I can have more time to do these type of things. But anyway, I put it on a timeline of when I believe that the Gospels were written. And then what we've done is we've looked at what the early church what we do is we look at what the early church fathers had to say about the Gospels. And when I talk about the early church fathers, I'm not talking about Origen, Cyprian, all those post-Nicene. Well, Origen wasn't post-Nicene, I guess, but the church fathers that are post-Nicene from 325. I'm talking about the church fathers that were the original eyewitnesses to the disciples, or were eyewitnesses to the eyewitnesses. That would include Irenaeus, Tertullian, Justin Martyr, people like that. And so when we look at what they had to say about the gospel message, saying that Jesus Christ is God incarnate, then you start to question this mantra that keeps coming out from the ilks of Bart Erhman, saying, well, what we have today is a copy of 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 a copy, or how far you want to take that. That's not true. That is not true. And most scholars realize that Bart Erhman is being disingenuous when he says that. And who are the ones that parrot what Bart Erhman has to say? Yes, it is our Dawahghandists friends are the ones that they parrot almost everything Bart Erhman says. The Bible has been corrupted. It's been corrupted, and one of the most trusted Christian scholars out there, even though Bart Erhman's not a Christian, but he is a New Testament critic. This is true. Even says that you can't trust it because it has been corrupted. Well, the fact of the matter is it has not been corrupted, unless you're going to define a variant as being corrupting a manuscript. And if you're going to do that, well, then what you have to do is say that the Quran has been corrupted. So notice you get, the hypocrisy and also the duplicity from your Dawahghandists. So what I'm going to do is, if you want, let me just ask you this. And I don't know if any of y'all will get this or not, or if you watched the stream that I did with Lloyd. Let me ask you this. If you are going to claim that the gospel message was not corrupted, how could you demonstrate that? How could you show that the gospel message that was initially written by the original authors of the gospels, how can you demonstrate that it wasn't corrupted? If you were going to demonstrate that it wasn't corrupted, how could you do that? Or how would you do that? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
You'd have to have the original.
The originals. Very good. You would have to have the originals. We call the originals the autographs. Now, the autographs, folks, the reason why they call them autographs is when letters were prepared in the first century, 2 letters were prepared. One was the one that you would keep, and the second one would be the one that you signed, that you would autograph and send to the person or persons that you intended the letter to be for. So this is why they call them the autographs. So what I'm going to do is show you how we know that these autographs existed much, much longer than what is presupposed in this screed of a book called Misquoting Jesus. I have it here someplace. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm talking about. Bart Erhman's book, Misquoting Jesus. Because what he says is that, okay, you would have the original autograph, it would be sent out to a church, and then you would have untrained, unlettered people copying it so they could take it to their church. And this is true. That much is true. But then that copy that those people had taken to that church, then that would be copied by another unlettered, untrained scribe who would make all kinds of errors, who would have all kinds of misspellings, who would have all kinds of words. And then the next thing you know, by it gets to the 5th or 6th generation, you have no idea what the original text said. And in some cases, he may have been correct. That may be right. But what if those autographs stayed around a lot longer than what was claimed? What if those autographs and copies of those autographs made it into the hands of the early church fathers? And so when the early church fathers started writing about what the autograph said, and they started writing opinions, I'm going to mute you, Steve, sorry. When they started writing about that, then you would have the autographs being quoted in the early church fathers. And now we have a multiplicity of other people writing the same thing. Okay, so before I get too deep in this, let me just go ahead and jump into this slideshow. I have to get to the part because, you know, as a matter of fact, I'm just going to go ahead and let me go ahead and do this again. Let me just go ahead and do this. I'm going to do this. Hold on a second. Hold on just a minute. Did I? Yes, I did. I messed it up. Okay, so let me represent this. Present. There, go. All right. So this is what I presented on Lloyd's channel this week. I was talking about how the guys were written early, how they were preserved through the autographs, testimony, authenticity, and corruption. Okay. And these are the sources that I've used for this slideshow. Again, if anybody wants the slideshow, I've had a couple people email me this week. And if you want a copy of it, just let me know and I'll send it right out to you. We talked about the early dating of the Gospels. And we all start with the destruction of the Jewish temple, because that is the most definitive event in first century Jewish history. And the thing about the destruction of the Jewish temple, folks, nobody in the entire New Testament mentions it. Nobody. There's nobody that's not mentioned one time. So we know that this occurred in 70 AD. We know that John was written before the destruction of the temple, and I've talked several times on this show why. John 5:2. Go to chapter 5, verse 2. It says, "Now there is in Jerusalem the pool of Bethesda with, was it 6 porticos or something like that." Jerusalem was destroyed, folks. Jerusalem was destroyed to include the pool with the porticos in 70 AD. So how can John say that if that's been destroyed? So we know John is before 70 AD. We know Acts was written when Paul was still in under house arrest in 64 AD. So it had to be written before 64, 65 AD. And we know that Acts was written after Luke. So that puts Luke earlier. And then we know that Matthew and Mark were written before Luke because Luke draws heavily from both Matthew and Mark. And then all of this is validated with the early church fathers, the patristic division or traditions that we have with the early church fathers. And there's a couple things that I'm going to add in here so we all understand.
Can I interrupt you for a second? I just want to be clear on something. So, are any of these the Islamic Injil? Do we have a copy of the Islamic Injil?
The Islamic Injil, yes, because in the Islamic Injil, when you read it, it describes. Here's what a lot of people don't know is that when we read the Islamic Injil, they say it's lost and nobody has read it, but in the Islamic Injil, we have Muhammad. It was actually a planter of churches in Arabia. And while he was doing this, and people, shunned his ministry and they persecuted him, forced him to move to Medina. And there he planted even more churches, spread the gospel message. And he was again persecuted for what he was doing. And then you get people like Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, Ali. What they did was they changed his message. And Uthman got a hold of all this, actually destroyed all of those writings, which were the Injil, burned them, and then changed them to fit his own idea of what they should say. And this is where you get the Quran itself today.
I see. So in other words,
I would choose the cow.
Yes, that's if you listen to, if you haven't had a chance, if you guys don't get a chance, one of the best apologists that does this today is Avery on God Logic's channel. This guy, I don't know how old he is. Does anybody know how old Avery is? He's a young fella. He's got to be in like his 20s or so. He's in his 20s. I mean, this guy is absolutely brilliant. And if you listen to the way that he argues and present, and that's one of his arguments. He goes, well, we know how, when he says that what does he say? Quran only Christians. That's right. I'm a Quran only Christian. And this is what Quran only Christians believe. They believe that Uthman is the one that corrupted the Quran when he had the Injil, and then he destroyed all of that. And this is why we have Uthman's. Anyway, okay. So where was I? Let's go back to this. I'm sorry, I get distracted once again. This is where we are. Okay, so here you have the traditions of the early church fathers, and then I'm going to throw in here, and this is what's going to be neat, is what a bishop in 380, actually it should say 305 AD, wrote about the Gospel of John, and also what Tertullian had to write about Paul's epistles in 190 AD. Now notice, this, when you talk about the early church fathers, I would include Tertullian in as part of the early church father traditions. But when we look at what he wrote in 190 AD and what this bishop in Alexandria, I believe he was, this Peter was in Alexandria, wrote in 305 AD, it's gonna knock your socks off, folks. And then when we look at the Codex Vaticanus, which is a mid 4th century document, a complete Bible in the 4th century, folks. was used for 600 years. So if you have here what they had here, and we can now go forward 600 years, I want to know where that corruption occurs. I would like to see a document written here that contradicts this, and this. Show me the corruption from a document that was written here. Because if you cannot, then you cannot claim corruption. Okay. And then, of course, oops, I'm clicking on the wrong thing here. And then this Santiaticus was the same thing. Santiaticus was written around 400 AD. And we have, that was used out until, whoops, Steve just popped back in. That was, the Santiaticus was used clear out until the 8th century. That's 300 years, folks, that these documents were used. And then what we do is we get the Injil right here, which creates the age of ignorance and desperation. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all.
Interrupt real quick. We have a spammer in the audience, Mr. Rambo 7, who's actually claiming the Injil is partially corrupt.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe he can explain why he believes that.
How can all his words be corrupt? Is not the Injil all his words? So how can they be corrupt?
What does 5:14 say? Let me look it up. Quran 5:14, chapter 5, the English translation preferably, because we all sprechen the English here. 14 says, what does 5:14 says? And for those who say, we are Christians, we took their covenant, but they forgot a portion of which they were reminded. So we caused among them animosity and hatred until the day of resurrection, and Allah is going, who cares? I mean, I cannot stand reading that book. I'm sorry. I can't do it. It is so convoluted. I mean, when you sit here and from those who say we are Christians, okay, we took their covenant, but they forgot a portion of that of which they were reminded. Who writes like that? I mean, what is that? That makes absolutely zero sense.
That's con man language. There's no specifics. It's all generalities. It's con man language.
Right. Yeah, this is exactly what you would expect to find. And we talked about that also on Lloyd's show, where we were talking about, when people are writing from an eyewitness testimony, or at least have interviewed the eyewitness, they provide you all kinds of details. For example, the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke has 110. Go to Chronic Geography, Dan Gibson's Chronic Geography, and it'll tell you the Gospel of Luke mentions 110 locations. 31 of them are different locations. He's very specific about where these events that he is describing occurred. And all of them are in Israel. He provides you the location. Okay, you go down to the Quran. Now remember, the Gospel of Luke has 27,000 words. The Quran has 77,000. I think. Doesn't matter. It has 3 times as many. The Quran provides 65 different references to locations. 65. Luke, just the one gospel, has 110. Of those 65 references, he only mentions in the Quran, only 9 different places are mentioned. So when we start talking about what a con man would write, he would not be very specific. He would be very general about the locations and places that he is commenting upon. Now listen, this is the important part. 65 different references, folks. 65. Let's do some math. The location of Ad is mentioned 23 times. So 65 minus 23 is 42. Am I correct on this? If I'm wrong, correct me. So 65. So an Ad is up in northern Arabia. It's not even close to Mecca. It's hundreds of miles away. The second place that's mentioned the most is mentioned 24 times, which gets us down to 18, is it? 42, 88, 22. Yeah, 18 times, 18 different places. Talmud. Talmud, what is where? That is further north. So out of the 65 references, 47 of them refer to Ad and Talmud, which are hundreds of miles away from Mecca. How is that possible? And then he mentions Medina twice, Midian 7 times, Valley of Mecca once, Valley of Becca, which we find in the Psalms, which is Jerusalem, or where it says Zion. Tuba, I don't even know who knows where Tuba is? Tuba, Tubba. Who knows? Does anybody know where that is? I don't even know where that is. Hij and Al-Ras twice and Hij once. So again, thanks to Dan Gibson, he's done the work for you. All you have to do is just open up his book, and right there in his book, it tells you what locations are mentioned in the Quran and how he's a con man, because he's not specific at all when discussing the locations. Okay. So,
hey, Eric.
Yes.
Could I just say something about that verse that the guy brought up, 5:14? No.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yep.
Was that somebody? What was the reason for showing this verse?
I have no idea. Let's see. The New Testament came 500. What is this? What is this? The New Testament came 500 years after the Hebrew. That wasn't it. Where did he write this? Listening. Dominic's the one that's causing the trouble back there, as far as I can see.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Right here. Here it is. The Injil on earth was partially corrupted. And he's saying, Surah 5:14. Okay, so he's saying that the Gospels were corrupted. Okay, so not the Injil.
Go Dominic. Go Dominic.
Okay,
Right,
I just want to say that this verse, first of all, in the Arabic, it says, "Alladhi qalu inna nasara," that we are Nasara. First of all, there's no Christian in the universe that says that about themselves. This is Muhammad didn't know how to say Christian. That's why the word Christian is not in the Quran anywhere. The word for Christian is Masihi. That's not in here. Nasara is some cult that Muhammad heard of. Akhadu mithaq, we took their covenant, but then it says, and they forgot a part of it. And you know what's interesting to me is because there's a verse in the Quran where Allah is talking about the Quran, and he says, we made them forget. Allah says, we made them to forget part of the Quran. That's why Allah allowed abrogation. Made abrogation. And so here it's saying that the Christians forgot a part of what we sent to them. But the word that really bothered me the most, the translation, it says, so we let enmity and hostility arise between them, between the Christians. And the word in Arabic is not we let, it's we incited. We incited violence and hatred.
Okay, who's the we? Is Allah got a mouse that he keeps in his pocket when he?
Exactly, and that's what the Najrani Christian. When Muhammad said to the Najrani Christians, he said, "You guys worship the Trinity." And then the Najrani Christian said to Muhammad, said, well, so do you, because all of your Quran is we. Everything Allah does, he's we, so anyway, I just wanted to say something about that verse.
Royal we.
Allah has a partner. His name is Muhammad. Muhammad is the real head of the sock puppet.
Well, here's a fun fact.
It's interesting that you brought up Hussein, Steve. You brought up the point about Nasara. I think that's really interesting because I've always thought that too. I was like, Nasara doesn't mean Christian. It means maybe like a helper. And some people say, well, it's like a helper of Christ. And I think it's interesting, your conclusion of the idea that it could be something completely different. because that is an interesting thing. A lot of people are like, oh, it says Christian. I'm like, but that word isn't Christian in Arabic. So I always thought, and in the Muslim community, people are like, oh yeah, that means Christian. But I'm like, but it doesn't though. Like it doesn't mean that in Arabic.
It doesn't, and it's not one time in the Quran is the word Christian used, except for in the English translations. In the Arabic, not one. The word in Arabic is Masihi. Never is that used. But the word Masih is Masih meaning Messiah. So they know the word, but they never use it.
Here's a fun fact. Here's a fun fact. In the Bible, the only things that identify themselves as we, they, them are the demons. Did you hear that?
You bigot, you homophobe. Just kidding.
Transphobe here. But no, seriously, think about that. So when Allah is saying we, there's no plural of majesty that didn't even exist until like the 1800s. And that's in the English language. But he's identifying himself as one of the demons.
I'm wondering which Jewish group says that it's okay to marry, consummate said marriage, and divorce prepubescent little girl.
It's the same.
It's
the same one. It's the same one that says that Ezra is the son of God.
That's yeah.
I was waiting for that one.
Exactly, but we can't find them. But yeah, that's exactly that group. There was something else that he posted up here. Here it is. The royal we. This is a common Islamic lie about the plurality of the plurality of majesty, as what we find in Elizabethan English, where there's a royal we. There is no such thing as a royal we. You ask any Jew about the royal we, and they'll tell you that you're either ignorant of the Hebrew language or you're probably a Dawahghandist trying to make an excuse for Muhammad when he used we in the Quran. It just doesn't work. Okay. I really don't want to sit here and deal. Let the guy post mods in chat. Just let him continue to post. I think the more that people like this, what is this, Mr. Rambo? Is that Mr.
He's a Rambo 7?
Rambo 7. I don't know what that is. But that's
he's going to get the 7 to beat up on him, I guess, because he's thinking he's Rambo.
I say let him keep talking and posting because he's boosting your show.
Yeah, that's and I appreciate that. So let him keep posting. That's quite all right. All right, so let's go ahead and get that off the screen. Let's get back to what we were just talking about. Number one, the New Testament doesn't describe the destruction of Jerusalem. And I've talked about that several times. I've talked about how John 5:2 says, now there's in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. It was destroyed in 70 AD. So we know that John was written before 70 AD. And here is where the pool of Bethesda is. This is how close it is to the Temple Mount. There was a siege wall that was built. And right here, a lot of the combat went on right here at this Antonia fortress, where a lot of the Roman soldiers went through this area right here to get to the Temple Mount. But all of this was laid to waste all around the temple so as they could have a clear avenue approach to the temple. They could not provide any types of defenses for the Jews could have any types of defenses. So all of this was destroyed in this siege in 70 AD. Okay, so when we look at this, you have the destruction of the Jewish temple, 70 AD, and we put John being written prior to 70 AD. And then when we look at Luke, we talked about the gospel or the book of Acts being written prior to 70 AD. And here's one of the main reasons what even pushes the book of Acts prior to 64 and 65 is the book of Acts mentions the death of mentions the death of Stephen, mentions the death of James the Less, but it doesn't mention the death of James, the brother of Jesus, who was the head of the Jerusalem church. And they have a hard date for him being martyred in 62 AD. So it's amazing that it's going to mention the death of Stephen, and it's going to mention the death of James the Less, but it doesn't mention the death of Paul, Peter, or James, the brother of Jesus, who was a very prominent, important member at that time. So that's how we know Acts was written prior to 62 AD. And then we know that Luke's Gospel preceded the book of Acts. And we know this because it says right there in the book of Acts, it says the first account I composed, Theophilus. So there must have been, what the first account was the Gospel of Luke. And then we look at Paul quoting the gospel in his letter to Timothy. Now, the letter to Timothy is written in 63 to 64. Wait a second. Paul penned his letter to Timothy in 57 AD. I'm sorry. So we know that the gospel had to be written prior to 57 AD. And there was another one where Paul references, let's see here, Luke's gospel, when they were talking about the Lord's Supper. And in 1 Corinthians, and it's right here, do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. It says this in 1 Corinthians. Luke's the only gospel that provides this in remembrance of me. Let's see here. This body given to you, do this in remembrance of me. Now, this other one up here, I forgot to add, where Paul considers Luke's gospel as scripture because he quotes Deuteronomy, and in the same breath he's quoting something from the gospel of Luke, the labor is worthy of his wages. So they know that this was written prior to that, or prior to Timothy. Now you get down here, what is this one? And this was 56 AD. So we're talking 56 AD, the Gospel of Luke. Minimum. That's it. That's the latest. It's probably written earlier than that. So when we look on the timeline, Acts, Gospel of Luke, 50s, we'll even just be generous and say 56 AD for the Gospel of Luke. And then we know Luke quoted from Mark and from Matthew quite a bit. And so that means that they were written prior to that, 350 verses from Mark, 250 verses from Matthew. And this puts Matthew and Mark then around 50 to 52 AD because they were being widely disseminated. So all of these Gospels being written early means that there's no time for embellishment. They're not going to be able to, because people are still alive at this time. So, how can you say that this man was resurrected when we can sit here and talk to people that were there that say that he wasn't resurrected, or they did, here's his grave. The reason why they can't do that is because they were written real early, and these people were the eyewitnesses were still around. And here you have them preaching what? Death on a cross, which contradicts the Quran, his deity being the Son of God and God incarnate, which contradicts the Quran. And since the Quran says that he didn't die on a cross, so it's going to definitely contradict the idea of the resurrection, which is mentioned several times. I've gone through this several times when we were talking about the crucifixion of Christ, how it's all over the New Testament. And then the multiplicity of manuscripts that we have just make it a slam dunk. So we have all four of the Gospels written prior to 70 AD, which prevent it from embellishment occurring. And then you have the patristic writings from the early church fathers. Again, when we look at the early church fathers, you have John, who taught Polycarp, Papias, and Ignatius, and also you have Clement of Rome, but also you have Irenaeus, Justin Martyr, Tatian, Clement. You have all of these other people who, again, all of them, folks, without exception, mention that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. He was God incarnate. So this idea, this Islamic idea that is often put out there is that, well, Jesus was made God at the Council of Nicaea. Folks, look at this. Polycarp lived or died in 150. Irenaeus died before the end of the 2nd century. Justin Martyr, Tatian, all of these guys lived and died prior to the Council of Nicaea, and they all wrote about Jesus being God incarnate. Let's look at Clement of Rome. Well, I didn't have his quote up here, but look what Papias writes about Jesus being, or he just provides a history. Polycarp, believe in our Lord and God, Jesus Christ. Then you go to Ignatius, Jesus Christ, our God. For our God, Jesus the Christ. God appeared in human form. For our God, Jesus Christ. Here's Ignatius right here, folks. He was a student of John. John was an eyewitness to Jesus Christ. So you have not only the eyewitness testimony in the Gospels, but you also have eyewitnesses, or at least, the eyewitnesses to the eyewitnesses from the Gospel. Irenaeus. Irenaeus is where? He's right here. He was a student of Polycarp. Polycarp was a student of John. So Irenaeus, what does he say about it? Jesus Christ is our Lord and what? God. Christ himself is the God of the living. He is himself in his own right God. Who else? Justin Martyr. Who's Justin Martyr? Justin Martyr's right here, folks. Justin Martyr, what does he write? Christ being Lord and God. Christ is called both God and Lord. He was God, Son of the only begotten. Clement of Alexandria. He's down here, but what is he saying? He alone being both God and man. He appeared as our teacher, that as God, he is made equal to the Lord of the universe. Who else do we got? Hippolytus of Rome. The Logos is God, with word of human God, the Word, with a human soul, God the Word, taking the flesh from her and assuming also a human. Origen, late or early 3rd century. Jesus Christ became a man, the Savior as God of the world. The Son of God is also omnipotent. The Savior is also God. Folks, you have all of the early church fathers saying that Jesus Christ was God. So how can you continue to say with a straight face that the gospel was corrupted at some point in time from when it was written down by the eyewitnesses to the Council of Nicaea, or to the publication or to the writing of Codex Vaticanus or Sancti Antiquus? You take your pick. They're both early, full and complete New Testaments. Okay, do I go to Matthew? Do I do this? I don't want to lose my audience. Matthew, we know Matthew was written because of the internal evidence, but also Papias says that Matthew wrote Matthew. There's nobody else in the early church disputes Matthean origin, authorship. Irenaeus says Matthew published his gospel. Mark, we know Mark. And here's why I'm doing this, folks, is because we hear this mantra of, well, we don't even know who wrote the gospel. It says the gospel according to Matthew, the gospel according to Mark, the gospel according to Luke, according to John. Right, the gospel, not the Injil, the gospel. What is the gospel? Gospel is good news. Is what Jesus Christ did. It's kind of a verb, if you want to look at it in the practical sense. So is the gospel, the good news according to Matthew, and based on what Jesus did. You have to be that kind of stupid to not catch on to that. But anyway, Irenaeus says that Mark wrote. Mark was got the gospel dictated to Mark by Peter. Tertullian, same thing. Clement of Alexandria, same thing. Origen says that. Justin Martyr says it. And the Anti-Marcionite prologue confirms that. Luke, same type of attestation. Irenaeus, Luke himself says it. Irenaeus says it. And the Muratorian canon from 190 lists that. John, Irenaeus lists it. Let's see here. Nobody doubts that John wrote John, but then again, you have some that do. Tatian, who wrote the Diatestron, affirms that, and the Diatestron, folk, was written around 170. So that is really early also. Tertullian says the same thing. Clement of Alexandria says the same thing. Origen, okay. And then also, look at here. Look who else says that John wrote John. Look at here, right here in the Masura, or Surat Rasul Allah, On page 103 and 104, you have the author of the biography of Muhammad saying that John wrote the Gospel of John. So you have more evidence for the Gospels than any of the works from antiquity. The early church fathers attest to it, and it's early. They all say that Jesus Christ is God. So if you can't believe the Gospels, you can't believe anything from history. So when we look at this, we can put the patristic writings from the early church fathers as a confirmation of what comes here. You do not get better attestation to any types of historical events from this time period than you do with the gospel record and with the New Testament. When you look at the Gospels written from 45 to 70 AD, the earliest copy that we have is, of course, P52, the Ryland Papyrus, and that dates about 130 AD. We have a total of 5,600 Greek New Testament copies. That does not include the 10,000 Latin copies of manuscripts that we have, the Syriac, the Armenian, the Coptic, all those different ones. Now, if you look at Homer, now here you have, let's say, John was written in 70 AD. That's 50 years. The earliest dated fragment of that, which is what we have today, confirms what was on that fragment. Oh, by the way, is only 50 years away from the event. When we look at Homer, was written 900 BC. We have 400 copies. Here we got 5,600, but let's say we have 400. This is being generous. Or I'm sorry, it was written in 400 BC. You have 640 copies. That's a 500-year period. 50, 500. Writings of Aristotle. Nobody doubts that Aristotle wrote what he did. And also, by the way, let me just include this brief little snide remark. We don't have what Aristotle wrote today because the Alexandrian library was burned by Umar in, what was it, 638, 642, somewhere around there, when they entered Alexandria. And I think one of the hadiths say that if people were concerned about burning all of those books, those ancient writings, and the saying goes, I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it says something on the lines that if it confirms the Quran, what is written there confirms the Quran, then we don't need it. If it doesn't confirm the Quran, then it needs to be burned anywhere. Something along, or Umar's quoted as saying something along those lines. I mean, what kind of idiocy? Never mind. Okay, let's get back. Anyway, okay, and then you have Tacitus, who was a Roman historian writing about 100 AD. The earliest copy we have from him is 1,000 years later, and we only have 20 copies. Suetonius, about the same thing, 800 years later, only 8 copies. Herodotus, that's 450. Oh, that's 450 plus 4, that's 900. That's what, 1,350 years. Nobody doubts what Herodotus wrote. Plato, same thing. And look at there, that's 1,350 years. So the bottom line is that, if you look at what we have in the Gospels and what we have with the New Testament, there's no other work from antiquity that even comes close, not even close. And yet we hear this mantra that it's been corrupted. If it's been corrupted, you're going to have to show me, Gunfighter, where this corruption changes the text to where it conforms to Islam, or how Islam corrects what was corrupted before. You're going to have to prove that to me. And the problem is that you can't. I can much more easily show you where the Quran is actually the one that is the corrupted text. Any text that says that the pharaohs used crucifixion is corrupt. Why? Because crucifixion didn't exist for another 1,000 years. Any text that says that, I don't know, Joseph was sold for coins. Well, we know that's false because coins were not used in 1800 BC. They weren't used until, about 900 BC. So you're only off by, hundreds of years there, at least, half a millennia. David wore chainmail. Really? That's 500. Chainmail wasn't invented for another 600 years on a different continent. there's a laundry list that we went through a couple of weeks ago called the historical errors, or the errors in the Quran. It was right after we did that debate with Nadir, just to show how easy it is to show that the Quran is historically incorrect. It's a flipping fairy tale is what it is. Okay, where are we now? All right. Okay, here's what I really wanted to get to. This right here. This is what is coming. This is what comes out of Craig Evans' book here, folks. If you go to this is in chapter 2, I believe, and you start hovering around page 80 or so, just so you don't have to kill yourself. Or no, 70. I started highlighting stuff around page 68. Sounds like the queen's out there mowing the yard. All right. One less thing I have to do today. But a lot of this information here, folks, is based off of what happened in Oxyrhynchus, Egypt. Two gentlemen from England, Arthur Hunt and Bernard Grenfell, went down there in 1896 looking for manuscripts, ancient manuscripts, and they found thousands and thousands of pages of manuscripts in a excavated dump. Listen to this, folks. This is important. This is what defeats the Bart Erhman and the Islamic Dawahghandist argument against these copying mistakes, this corruption crap that is often thrown at the Bible. Using stratigraphy, this is archaeological practice where you use stratigraphy to determine the age in which the items that they're uncovering were buried. So using stratigraphy, they have determined that you have the strata that they found all of these documents were buried in the 5th century. This is the important part. They were buried in the 5th century. Okay, get this guy off the screen, guys. Just hold on, because this is the important part. This is the important part. These items were buried in the 5th century. What they are uncovering are documents from the 2nd century. So if these documents, these libraries of documents, were not buried until the 5th century, but they originated in the 2nd century, what does that tell us? That tells us that these documents were not, they're not given a letter. Somebody's given a letter. Folks, this is not the way it works. This is what Bart Erhman and his ilk wants you to think. Here's a letter. Here you go. And then they would copy it down and then take that original and throw it away. These documents were used for centuries, and they can prove it, and they have proven it at Oxyrhynchus. They have clearly demonstrated that documents, especially those documents like the letters from Paul, like the gospel letters, which were venerated by the early churches, the autographs were kept around for centuries. And in this book, Craig Evans talks about how people would say that if you want to know if you have a difficulty in somebody's writing, so when they are arguing against these heresies, these heretical ideas like Gnosticism, which would be like the Gospel of Thomas, or those things that the Muslims like to cite, when they were arguing against these documents. Can you guys hear that? Can you guys hear that?
Only when you emphasize whatever that is.
Okay, that's my wife mowing the front yard, right in the middle of my show. Thanks, honey.
We can't hear it on the air, though.
Okay, all right, great. Yeah, I shouldn't be so ungrateful either. Bad man, because she's out there doing something that I normally do. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here, folks, is that you have these documents were used for centuries, and so when they were arguing against what the original said, they could go back to the autographs. It wasn't like they didn't have them. They had the autographs at their disposal. And what Lisa said, that the documents were used for between 75 to 100 or 500 years. And this is something that I brought up. Today is Father's Day, but let's not even use that example. Let's say that I did something important in the Army. I didn't do anything really important, but let's say I get a letter from President Trump thanking me for what I did in the Army. How long do you think that I'm going to hold on to that letter? Am I just going to hang on?
Forever.
Forever. I'm hanging on to that letter until the day I die. Wouldn't you think? Of course. Now, and let's say after I die, the kids come to the house and they're going through and they find this letter from President Trump. Do you think that that's going to go to the dump? Is that going to go to the dumpster? No, they're not throwing away. My grandchildren, are they going to throw away a letter from the President of the United States? My great-grandchildren, my great-great-grandchildren, my great-great-great-great-grandchildren, are they? No, they're all going to keep this letter in the family as long as possible. We think of books today because books are easy to print today. I mean, after the invention of the printing press, the cost of the printed word dropped like a rock. You no longer had to hire scribes in order to go through that lengthy process of writing things out. Now you can get books and the cost of the printed material. And this is why literacy went through the roof also, and why we had the Renaissance. Folks, the problem, the thing that you need to understand is that these letters, these autographs were kept around for centuries. Well, how do we know that? Thank you for asking. Let's go back to the slideshow. We know that these things hung around for centuries because of the Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. The majority of the scrolls that they found at Qumran predate Qumran, which is what, 73 AD is when Masada, so this is when all that area was conquered by the Romans. They predate that by 100 to 150 years. And
hey, just let you know, Eric, one of my professors actually worked on Q.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. That would just be a cool gig. You know, I'm sorry. I don't know. But anyway, let's see here. And then in the Christian works, Vaticanus. Vaticanus is the 4th century document, meaning it was written in the 300s. It was used in studies until all the way up into the 900s, into the 10th century, folks. This one Bible, they have documented use of this thing until, for 600 years. The Sinaiticus, same thing, for 300 years. When you look at Codex Bezae, this is a 4th or 5th century document that was used, or that was repaired in 850, but this was used to write or translate the King James Bible. But look, this is what is exciting here, folks. If you're gonna pay attention at any point in this show, this is the highlight of the show right here. Because this right here, this piece of information right here is what blows Bart Erhman and all of these Dawahghandists out of the water. Right here. The Gospel of John. Now, in 305, you have this guy right here, a Bishop Peter from Alexandria. Now, folks, the reason why he's writing this is because if you don't know anything about Roman history and the persecution of the Christian church, the most severe period of Christian persecution by the Romans was under the Emperor Diocletian. Diocletian was the one that was right before Constantine. Diocletian purged the church of its writing materials, the New Testaments. If you were caught with it, you were thrown in prison. If you were a pastor in these churches, a lot of times you were killed. If you were a member caught with it, you were thrown into jail. And this is where you get the stories of people, well, more of the stories anyway, thrown to the lions at the games. Diocletian was an evil animal. And so this is written. This is written during the time of Diocletian's persecution of the church. Bishop Peter died in 305, so this is written around 290. Now, look what he writes here, folks. This is important. Look what he writes here. Now it was the preparation about the third hour. He's quoting from John, as the accurate books have it. What are the accurate books? The copies of the Gospel of John. And the autograph, folks, the autograph. What is the autograph? The autograph is the original copy of the Gospel of John itself, of the evangelist John, which is what? Up to this day has, by the grace of God, because Diocletian's Roman persecution has not got their hands on it, been preserved in the most holy city of Ephesus, where it is there venerated by the faithful. Are you guys catching that? 290. 290. This is almost the 4th century. This is the end of the 3rd century. There is a copy of hindsight. You guys, look, send me an email and I will email you this slideshow. You don't have to write this down. Email ericthekefer.com or ericthekefer@gmail.com. I have no problem. I've already sent this out. I want people to have this information. Folks, 290. It says that they're venerating. Look what it says here. They are venerating this document. They're venerating it. Why? Because this was written by the Apostle John. This is an autograph. 290. So if they want to know and they want to compare their copies of the Gospel of John to see if they're corrupt, all they have to do is go to Ephesus where they have the autograph, folks. This is important. Anytime somebody sticks that Bart Erhman argument, a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, you can go ahead and refer them to the Bishop of Alexander, Peter, the Bishop of Alexander, in 290 AD, is writing and saying that the autograph of the Gospel of John is still in existence. This is how history is done. This is how we know what Papias wrote. We don't have anything we don't have the autograph of John anymore. It was written on papyrus, for Pete's sake. Papyrus is a very brittle type of material to write upon. What was I saying? But the thing that you need to understand about this is that they had the ability to go to the original 200 years, over 200 years after it had been put out. So when they say that the gospel had been corrupted and you have the original, by whom, where was it, and what was corrupted in it? If we can say with all kinds of certitude that it was existed in 290 AD, and then in addition to that, and this is the important part, this is another important part, we have all of the writings, the patristic writings from the early church fathers prior to that, confirming what existed in 290. You have more evidence showing the continuity and the completeness of the original than any other work from antiquity, than anything. And so that the second guessing that, I don't know what it could have said. There was a minor change here. There's a variant here. Shut your pie hole. There is no way that you can make this argument to me. Not anymore. Not anymore. It gets better. Of course, it gets better because why? This is the cross and the crescent.
Could you explain what an autograph is again?
Yes, an autograph is the original copy. When letters were prepared in the ancient world, in the 1st century, 2 letters were prepared of the same letter, 2 copies of the same letter. One was maintained by the person sending it out, and then the one that was sent out, the person writing the letter would sign it. He would autograph it. This is why they're called autographs. And that autograph would be received with the person's signature on it, saying that I wrote this or I had so-and-so write this for me, and then they would sign it. That's why they call them autographs. That's in the book also. Folks, you need to get this book. You really do. This book is just so rich in Oops. Whoa. Slow down, gunfighter. I'm going to knock my monitor off the desk here. Anyway, does that answer your question, Steve? That's
Yes, thank you. So the autograph is, there's two so are you saying like the Gospel of John, there were two Gospels of John, one that John kept and then one that he sent?
yes. And this is the one that he sent. Well, we don't know really which one. No, because he says that this is the autograph. This is what it says. It says, and the autograph itself of the evangelist John, which up to this day, 290, has been preserved and is venerated. This is when I was talking about, if President Trump wrote me a letter saying, "Hey, nice job, Eric. We think you're, the King Poobah for doing whatever," I would keep that, and I would, we would venerate that. I mean, we got this from Donald Trump. Even if you hate Donald Trump, let's say Barack Obama sent it to me, I would still keep that. It wouldn't carry as much weight, but I would still keep that. Why? Because it was the position of the person who sent it to me. Even Bill Clinton, if Bill Clinton sent me something, I would say, "Wow, I got a letter from the President of the United States." And this is another great point. They didn't just send out, a lot of times they just didn't send out one copy. They sent out several copies. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, they would send out all kinds of copies. It wasn't just one copy that they would send out at this time. Okay, so it does get better. Let's get into that. Okay, other references to manuscripts. Tertullian writing in 190, and notice the title of the letter that he's writing here: Prescription Against the Heretics. So in the Prescription Against the Heretics, he's citing Paul's autographs as still existing. He's saying that the autographs still exist in Corinth, Philippi, and Ephesus. They have what? The authentic writings. And also Tertullian defends the Gospel of Luke by asserting that it's still in existence to be consulted. Other references to the age of the manuscripts include Gaius of Rome talking about how they would lay their hands on the divine scriptures, saying that they had corrected them, nor can they show the originals. So when they're defending the autographs or defending the Gospels against these heresies of the Gnostics, folks, when we're talking about what the Gnostics were writing, the Gnostics are the best friends of the Quran. When we look at what we find in the Quran, for example, from the infancy gospel of Thomas, where we have Jesus speaking from the cradle, the palm tree bending down, the Jesus getting mad at a friend and striking him dead, or all of these stories are from Gnostic sources. And so when we look at the early church writers, the early church fathers, they're defending orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is established by the authentic autographs, confirmed by the authentic autographs that they had in their hands. So to say that that they were a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, shut your pie hole. They would be able to go back. This is what Gaius is saying. Let's look at this again. Gaius is saying they have not feared to corrupt divine scriptures. For this cause, they did not fear to lay hands on the divine scriptures, saying that they had corrected them. What did they do? They corrected them. Nor can they show originals from which they made their copies. So when they go ahead and try to change them in their own writings, he's saying they don't have the originals. Who has the originals then? We do. Augustine, 400 AD, when he's disputing with the Manichaeans, says, and if any uncertainty remain, we should consult what? The original text. Well, how can you consult the original text if you don't have it? So Augustine, writing for, he's come on. So again, these ancient texts were used for centuries. We have direct attestation that the autographs existed centuries later, and these autographs were often consulted when the church fathers were defending orthodoxy against these heresies like Gnosticism. There we go. Okay, so again, you can put The Gospel of John at 300 AD. You can put the epistles of Paul at least to the end of the 2nd century. The autographs existing that long. And then again, you have Codex Vaticanus, which is written in the early 4th century, 300s. So you could honestly say that the Codex Vaticanus was able to have the Gospel of John copied from the original. You could actually say, you could say that it wouldn't be a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of shut your pie hole. The originals existed for centuries, and the same thing with the Sinaiticus. The only time it became a problem is when you get out here with Islam in 632 AD, and this is where you start the beginning of the age of ignorance and desperation trying to change it. What about the variants? The variants, we'll be almost done here, folks. I'm almost done. This is the last slide. The variants. This comes from Dan Wallace's book. I have it right here. Where is it? Where it is it? I have it right here. Theology. What did I do with it? Doggone you, Kaffir. I just had it here in front of me. Anyway, Dan Wallace, it's Defending Against Corruption is the name of the book. Or another revisiting the idea of corruption. Where is it? I found Bart Erhman's book. Where's Dan Wallace's? It was right here, Theology. Lord help me. I'll find it. Anyway.
Are they in alphabetical order?
No, they're not. They're just in any order that I decided to look at them. I need to do better about this. But you know what? I have time. I might think about doing this sometime. Anyway, when we look at the variants, this idea of variants, you got 5,800, 5,600. That's some typos. 5,600 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 Latin, 5,000 other ones. You got about 25,000 in total manuscripts of the New Testament. Dan Wallace says it's embarrassment of riches. The New Testament itself has about 140,000 words, but Bart Erhman likes to emphasize that it has 300 to 400,000 variants. And this is true. Nobody disputes that. They don't know exactly how many they are, but it does has a lot. But the problem is that 99.9% of them are neither meaningful nor viable. They have no impact on the text themselves. You have 20,000 lines of text, folks, and only 40 of them are in question. And let me just briefly tell you where the majority of that comes from. It comes from the woman caught in adultery. That comes from the long ending of Mark. And then that also comes from 1 John 5:7 that talks about the Trinity. None of those have any impact on any core Christian doctrine. The one from the Trinity, we can get it from the Great Commission. Go ye therefore and baptize all nations in the name of who? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Trinity. You have the Trinity in the baptisms. You have the Trinity all over the New Testament. The woman caught in adultery, that deals with forgiveness. We have Jesus forgiving sinners all over the New Testament. And then the idea of, picking up snakes and stuff, the Gospel of Mark, I wouldn't suggest that. But again, you also have the resurrection in the long ending. We have that in the other Gospels too. So there's nothing there that the big three that they always throw out there that invites that. There are some minor ones, throughout, but nothing that impacts any core teaching in the New Testament. So this idea that the variance is problematic is a lie also. Was somebody saying something there?
I wanted to say something, if that's okay.
Let me think of it. Yeah, that's fine. You go ahead.
All right, thanks. The subject is always a strange one in interfaith conversations because I don't understand, in a sense I do and I don't understand the modern Muslim position where folks are like, well, the texts are corrupted. Because the problem that I see with it is that in taking that position, you are denying the earlier scholarship, you're denying the sources, because that's not what it says. In fact, in the Islamic creed, you have to believe in God, you have to believe in the prophets, you have to believe in the books, you have to believe in the power of God, you have to believe in the day of judgment. These are a part of the creed. So the creed is that you believe in the books. So it's a very problematic position to say that the books are corrupted. Like I've said before and earlier in other shows, there are other strategies one could do to engage this. But the problem is that just saying, well, because it doesn't fit my view, it has to be corrupted. Well, you face a huge crisis if you do that, because you might win this battle. Like I said before, you might win the battle of saying, well, I can make fun. Like I was watching the Speaker's Corner, and Dr. Wood was there, and there was this guy named Saif or something, or Sharif, I forgot what the guy's name was, but he basically was saying horrible things about the big JC, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty terrible thing to do.
You were saying bad things about who?
Jesus.
Was it that little Siraj guy?
Siraj. It was Siraj. That's it. It's horrible.
Okay,
horrible
Darcy,
things.
is Darcy here?
Huh?
Darcy, are you there? Can you hear me, Darcy?
Yeah, I'm here.
How did I describe Siraj when we were talking about him at the beginning of the show?
Oh my gosh, I don't dare repeat it.
So if you watch the Chronicles of Narnia, have you seen the Narnia series?
Yes, I have. I've read all the books too.
No, the movie. Have you seen the movie?
I've seen the movies. I saw the British ones. I saw the new ones. I read the books. Yeah, I'm very familiar.
Okay. The Chronicles of Narnia. You have the Queen, the Snow Queen. Is that what they call it? The Snow Queen? Okay. Siraj reminds me of her driver.
Oh God.
That's who he reminds me of.
Well, yeah, that's the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's the second.
Yeah, that's the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah, the second. Yeah. Anyway, okay. I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
You're good. No, please. We're having conversations. But the point was, he was saying horrible, offensive things that I'm like, and I noticed this because Nadir does this too, and I'm like, you're saying horrible things about Christ and horrible things about the New Testament or the Testament, the Gospels, and I'm like, you do realize when you do that, you're attacking Islam. Like if you want to support Islam and promote Islam, okay, fine. But if you attack Christianity and you attack Judaism, and I saw this, Daniel did this in his debate against this Jewish rabbi, where I'm like, when you attack these traditions, you attack your own tradition. It's a really stupid position, I think, in general. But looking at this type of situation, they're like, it's corrupted, it's bad. And I said, well, you have two routes if you say it's corrupted. The two routes are either God is a deceiver, which I think is a really bad thing. I would say if you're a religious person, that's a pretty blasphemous thing to say. If you're saying that God is a deceiver, or you're saying that God is weak and God cannot protect God's text. And it's usually people take the latter route where they're like, well, we have free will. And I said, if we have free will, does that override God's will? That's a big philosophical, theological crisis. God can't protect God's word, and a human being can change God's words. If you're saying God made these words, then you face a huge crisis, because what you're saying is that God is weak or God is a deceiver. Neither of these positions is a tenable route. And I would say, if you want to take those routes, it's pretty, for a person who's following the orthodoxy, it's heretical and blasphemous. So
the problem is that they can't prove it either. They cannot prove their point. They can make all kinds of accusations, all kinds of assertions. The problem with Islam is that they know so many facts that simply are not true. They know that Paul corrupted the Gospels, corrupted Jesus' message. Okay, prove it. Prove it. Show me where Paul's message corrupted what Jesus Christ taught. Go ahead. Give it your best shot, gunfighter. Secondly, all these other facts about, corruption within the Gospels. Well, this has changed here. This has changed here. That does not. You're going to have to provide me a definition of what corruption is. If you want corruption, I can show you real corruption. I can open up the Quran and show you how the Quran corrupts history, how the Quran corrupts science, how the Quran corrupts morality, for crying out loud. If you want corruption, fine. I can show you all kinds of corruption within the Quran itself. The Quran corrupts everything around it. Don't try to sit here and tell me that after this information here that has been presented here today, don't try to tell me that the Bible was changed by scribes and monks, you know, in the 15th, 13th, 14th, 15th century, to where we can't know what it says in the first, second, third, or fourth. Don't try to sell that to me anyway. And if any of you, like I mentioned before, if any of you want a copy of the slideshow, all you have to do is email me, and I'll be more than happy just to send it, because it's just a click, and boom, you can have it. It has all of this information in there that was presented today, and you can refer to it in order to defend against this charge of this scurrilous charge that comes from this book and has been popularized by Bart Erhman, but also used continuously by the Dawahghandists. But there's something about this book in its, let me see here. And what is this? This is this the second edition? Bart Erhman. I think this is the second edition, because in this edition, we have a, let's see here. Is this the conclusions on page 252? And on page 252, Bart Erhman is asked this question, because they wanted to sell more books, evidently. Dan Wallace tells this story really well. I can't do it. But it says, Bruce Metzger, your mentor in textual criticism, to whom this book is dedicated, has said that there is nothing in these variants of Scripture that challenges any essential Christian beliefs, i.e. the bodily resurrection of Jesus or the Trinity. And then listen to what they ask him. Why do you, Bart Erhman, believe these core tenets of Christian orthodoxy to be in jeopardy based on the scribal errors you discovered in the biblical manuscripts? Here's what Bart Erhman says. This is the important part. This is what Bart Erhman says. Down here it says, there would be very few points of disagreement, maybe 1 or 2 dozen places out of many thousands. This is the differences of where, because he says, we are in complete agreement on the number of very important historical and textual questions, him and Bruce Metzger. If he and I were put in a room and asked to hammer out the consensus statement on what we think the original text of the Testament would probably look like, again, there would be very few points of disagreement, maybe 1 or 2 dozen places out of many thousands. The position, listen, I argue, if you want Misquoting Jesus, does not actually stand at odds, with Professor Metzger, who is an evangelical Christian, that the essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. That is the hero, Bart Erhman, may Allah be pleased with him, quoting or answering this question. Well, why do you think they changed these core beliefs? He said they don't change the core beliefs. They have nothing to do with the core beliefs. Death, deity, resurrection. All of these things that Muhammad argues against in his corrupted Quran. He wants to corrupt history, the history of the crucifixion. Oh, they crucified him not. It only had made appear to him. Liar. That's from a Gnostic gospel. We get that from the Nag Hammadi library, the second great treatise of the sect. We know where it comes from. So, the bottom line is that this show today was designed to provide you solid ammunition for defending your faith. If you want this slideshow, go ahead and email me. I'll be more than happy to send it to you. I put a lot of research and effort into looking a lot of these data facts up here. I would also recommend that you buy Dr. Craig Evans's book here, because it is just a treasure trove of information. Here's one thing that he brought up that I forgot to bring up. This is pretty cool. It's called the Jesus Cup. Now, the Jesus Cup was discovered in Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt, and it has an inscription on it, and it's a 1st century cup. Co-founder says announced the discovery of a ceramic cup during the underwater exploration of the ancient city of Alexandria, on which are inscribed the words "De Christo o something," which means the magician by Christ. So this Jesus cup, what this Jesus cup does is that, there you go. The Jesus cup, it says that Jesus was a magician. Jesus the Christ was a magician, meaning that he had special powers that people could draw from, even if they didn't believe that he was the Son of God or whatever. They knew that he had special powers. This is 1st century, folks. This means that this idea of Christ has spread to Egypt hundreds of miles away early in the 1st century. So it tells you the dissemination of the gospel message had exploded on the site. Again, all of this information by Dr. Evans is in this book, Jesus and the Manuscripts. Okay. I had one more thing to show you. I think Rad sent this to me. Rad's always sending me stuff from Twitter, because I think he lives on Twitter. I'm not sure if he lives. He's not banned from it. Whenever he gets banned from it. And oh, by the way, we have our friend, the lapdog for the Imam out of Houston, Texas, is trolling our channel once again and reporting things. And every time they get reported, I just send it in, to challenge it, and it gets dismissed. I don't know why he bothers doing it, but that's okay. You want to waste my time? You go on around ahead. I got all the time in the world. Let's see here. I said, what does this say here? I said the Old Testament and the Tanakh may look the same at a glance, but details do have differences. What are you talking about? Do you even know what you're talking about? The Tanakh and the Old Testament may look the same at a glance. What is he talking about, Dominic? Actually, you read Bart Erhman's blog. He is not stupid. Deny the crucifixion. Yeah, this is a great point. Yeah, only people who follow Muhammad deny the crucifixion. They're stupid enough to do that too. The very one thing that saves you from yourself, from eternity, separation from God, is what Jesus Christ did on that cross. And your false prophet, denies it. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this. Here's somebody filled with the spirit of Muhammad right here. This is where are we? Right there.
You're a liar. I wouldn't trust you, and I hate you as well. So the point is, you won't have a conversation with me because I'm a Christian. No, I won't do anything you say because you're a liar. You're a Christian. I hate you for the sake of Allah. You hate me for the sake of Allah. I hate you for the sake of Allah. All right. I hate you for the sake of Allah. Every Christian, I hate you all for the sake of Allah. Any Jew, any Christian, I hate you all for the sake of Allah. He hates me for the sake of Allah. You hate these and the other. Would you kill me if you get a chance? If we're in war, I would chop your head off. Yeah, Allah guide you. If we're fighting in war, am I supposed to let him kill me? I said, if we are. No, let's ask this again. Do you hate me? Yes, I hate you for the sake of Allah. Who taught you to hate me? Islam did.
All right. I don't think we can end on anything better than that. It tells you what the Quran and the teaching Muhammad do.
That was lovely. She sounds like such a nice girl. That was a girl, right? I can't see. So sounds like such a nice person.
That person needs to go to jail. That's called inciting. It's inciting violence. Time to go to jail.
Keep in mind, this is in London. This is at Speaker's Corner, and there is no such thing as freedom of speech in England.
But guys, you're being so Islamophobic. That's a very nice person. Sounded so nice, so loving, so caring.
And these are the cops that will allow Hatum Tash to be stabbed over and over again.
Yeah, we cannot forget a Muslim tried setting a Christian on fire. Well, David and Avery were over there.
They tried to do what?
A Muslim tried to set a Christian on fire with a lighter.
Really? While
I'll have
David,
to send you that video.
yeah, please do. I'd like to see that and play that so everybody can see it. Okay, so that is, we're going to wrap it up early today. Don't tell her I said this. We don't have Connie here today, so we don't have somebody cajoling us into staying until at least 6. Let's see here. Hang on. What was that? Let's see. He didn't say anything. He was wearing an Israeli flag, and he took a lighter to it. Okay. This is from hindsight. Okay. Let's see here. Does anybody have anything that they want to add, say, in rebuttal, response to anything that was said? Again, if you want a copy
Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If you want
Yasu Akbar.
So far.
I wanted to say something. I think that is just horrendous. And I mean, it's just weird because it just depends on what narrative of Islam the guy wants to take. Because if he's reading the text, it says Ahl Kitab, so it's interesting. And I get it. There's certain positions that support Christians and Jews, and there are other positions that don't. So, just depends.
Which tradition supports Christians and Jews?
Oh, no, it says, like, in the 2nd chapter, it talks about that if you will have no fear if you do what God says, if you're a Sabian, a Christian, or a Jew. It doesn't have the word Christian, but like we talked about before, but the word Nasr, I guess people refer to it as that. So.
All I know is that 98.6 calls us the worst of creatures.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the difficulty. It just depends on what.
It's not difficult. I mean, if you believe, and this is where I disagree with you, Isa. If you believe that the Quran is from Allah, then you therefore are compelled. I would be, if I believed the Quran was from God, I would be compelled to believe the things that are said within it. And one thing that I know that it says about the Christians is that they're the worst of creatures, them and the Jews both. And if they are the worst of creatures, this is that slippery slope that we start talking about, where you can justify any type of action that you want to against Christians and Jews. Why? Because they're the worst of creatures. We're not talking about the worst of human beings. We're talking about worse than my 3 little pigs here. And if you're worse than a pig, what can you do to them? You can slaughter them and do whatever you want to. Not that the Muslims would slaughter pigs. Okay, sheep or cows or goats or whatever. You take your camels. You take your pig. But we're worse than those. So when we start talking about, the traditions and that following that there's no violence perpetuated against Christians and Jews, I would beg to differ. It's happened throughout all of the history of Islam and continues.
Today is their day of slaughter, the day that they slaughter camels and goats, things that the Hebrew Bible forbids, the Torah forbids. And their concept of slaughter is for eating, not for sacrifice. They call it for sacrifice, but they eat what they sacrifice. So that's really confusing.
All right, guys, I hope that you enjoy what's left of Father's Day, and we'll be back here next Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time with another edition of the Cross and the Crescent discussion group. If you have any suggestions or topics that you think that we should discuss here on the show, again, Eric Theckefer at gmail.com. Rad, what are you doing? Why aren't our names up here anymore? What is up with this? There we go. You didn't do that. That's my fault. I've always played Rad too. I feel extra sorry for that. I'm sorry for doing that, Rad. But it's all one word, Eric Theckefer at gmail.com. And send me there's some topics that, and Mr. Rambo, if you want to come next week, be on the panel, you're more than welcome, sir. You're more than welcome. We can disagree with you and still be cordial and polite, and we will be. We always are.
Don't forget to close. Oh, and if you're ending early, you're gonna have to end it on what do you call it, Rumble.
Yes, polls closed. So God bless everybody. We will see you next Sunday on the Cross and Crest discussion group. God bless you all.
Advanced student and specialist, that the standard narrative has holes. That's what
that the Muslims were rioting against one another. And as much as we don't want to face the fact, the Muslims were lying sometimes. They were fabricating, they were embellishing, and that might be hard to accept, but that is a reality.